Hollywood taught the world to mistake a spotlight for a bank vault. A child box office king carried a studio, then fought for control of checks. A teenage voice turned one musical into treasure that kept earning backstage. A Vegas titan earned fortunes by the week only to leave the government circling his estate. And a horror face still sells every October, though the man beneath it needed help with burial costs. Their images became immortal. Their ownership did not. Before we begin, tell us which classic star you still watch and where you're watching from. Mickey Rooney. At his peak, Mickey Rooney was not merely famous. In 1939, exhibitors ranked him the world's #1 box office draw. MGM built the Andy Hardy series around his energy, paired him with Judy Garland, and put him in prestige pictures, such as Boys Town. He had earned since childhood, helping keep studio turnstiles moving through the Depression, but Rooney did not own those films. He worked under the studio system for a salary while MGM controlled the negatives distribution and later reuse. The early contracts that made him a household name were not designed to give him meaningful residual income decades later. The money he did receive also met relentless drains. Rooney married 8 times. Divorce settlements, alimony taxes, family obligations, and uneven investments followed him for years. In 1962, despite a career most actors could only imagine, he filed for bankruptcy. He never truly stopped working. Television guest roles, stage tours, commercials, and small films became less a victory lap than a way to keep cash moving. Late in life, he depended partly on Social Security. Then came an even darker turn. In 2011, Rooney testified before the United States Senate that he had been a victim of elder abuse and financial exploitation. He described feeling trapped and powerless, while another person controlled essential parts of his life and money. Litigation later produced a multi-million-dollar stipulated judgment against a stepson accused of misappropriating his funds. Rooney died in 2014 at 93. His estate was widely reported at roughly $18,000. That number does not erase 80 years of earnings. It reveals where the durable value went. MGM kept the library. Broadcasters kept showing the films. Audiences kept recognizing the face. He was not proof that fame creates wealth. He was proof that Hollywood could use a child star for 8 decades and still leave him fighting for control of his own money. Judy Garland. If Rooney showed how a child star could help build a studio without owning the old profits, Judy Garland showed what happened when the studio also controlled the body producing them. Garland was still a teenager when MGM turned her voice into one of its most valuable sounds. The Wizard of Oz made her immortal. Meet Me in Street. Louis Easter Parade and a succession of musicals made her essential to the studio's identity. Yet she was paid under a weekly contract. MGM owned the films, the recordings made for them, and the long afterlife of those classics. The schedule was punishing. Accounts of the studio years describe doctors and executives using medication to keep young performers awake, thin, and working, then helping them sleep when the day ended. Garland's later dependence cannot be blamed on one cause, and MGM alone did not create every disaster that followed. But the system taught her early that her health time and income belonged to other people first. MGM dismissed her in 1950. She rebuilt herself on stage, and her 1961 Carnegie Hall concert became one of show business's legendary triumphs. The applause thundered. The ledger did not. Management, marriages, illness, and taxes consumed her earning. The IRS placed liens on her income and property. Her Brentwood home was eventually sold under financial pressure. In her final years, Garland performed wherever a contract could keep creditors back, including London's Talk of the Town. She died in 1969 at 47. The debt attached to her estate has often been reported in the millions, with $4 million the figure most frequently repeated, though estimates vary. The contrast, the Wizard of Oz, never stopped earning. Television broadcasts made it a ritual. Home video created new revenue. Licensing created more. Garland did not own that machine. MGM kept the films. Garland kept singing to satisfy debts created long after the applause was gone. She was paid to become immortal, not to profit from immortality. Sammy Davis Jr. Judy Garland sang while tax liens followed her. Sammy Davis Jr. earned at a level that should have made tax trouble seem impossible. At his Las Vegas peak, Davis was one of America's most complete entertainers. He could sing, dance, act, mimic, play instruments, command a nightclub, and carry television. As a member of the Rat Pack, he became part of a national mythology. Reports from his prime placed his earnings near $25,000 a week, an extraordinary sum for the period. The money came, then moved out even faster. Davis supported a large entourage, gave generously, spent lavishly, and carried the costs of a life built around constant performance. His generosity was not stupidity. It was how he lived and cared for others. But generosity combined with weak controls, expensive habits, and dangerous tax advice can become a financial leak no income can seal. Tax shelters marketed as legitimate deductions later failed under scrutiny. Audits brought penalties and interest. As the IRS claims compounded, Davis had to keep earning simply to service the past. In 1988, already ill, he joined Frank Sinatra and Liza Minnelli on the Ultimate Event Tour. The billing suggested royalty. Behind the curtain stood the need for cash. Davis died of throat cancer in 1990. He left an IRS debt widely reported at about $7 million. The government moved against the estate, seizing and auctioning property. Even personal memorabilia became part of the collection effort. His widow, Altavise, was left in severe financial difficulty, while lawyers spent years untangling the claims and rebuilding control of his legacy. Davis was not broke because the money never came. He was broke because the money never stopped leaving. That is the difference between income and ownership. A giant weekly check can disappear. A tax penalty can grow. An estate can be seized. The performer supplied the magic, but the creditors arrived with documents that outlived the applause. Veronica Lake. Sammy Davis lost enormous income to a debt machine. Veronica Lake discovered how quickly Hollywood could stop producing income at all. In the early 1940s, Lake was a Paramount icon. Her peekaboo hairstyle became so widely copied that wartime safety officials worried about women wearing it near factory machinery. The government-backed campaign asking her to change the style proved how deeply her image had entered American life. She appeared opposite Alan Ladd in films such as This Gun for Hire and The Glass Key. Paramount sold mystery, danger, and cool glamour through her face. But the studio owned the pictures and the publicity apparatus. When executive damage had expired, Lake did not possess a library of rights that could replace a vanished salary. Her reputation for being difficult damaged relationships inside the industry. Her Paramount contract ended in 1948. Divorces followed. So did tax problems. A legal conflict with her mother over money earned during her early career added another wound. Even the income she had made as a young star had become a subject of dispute. By the late 1950s, Lake was working at the Martha Washington Hotel in Manhattan. Newspapers discovered that the former Paramount icon was serving drinks. She reportedly returned checks sent by sympathetic fans, insisting that the work was honest and that she was not asking for charity. The tragedy is not that she worked as a cocktail waitress. The tragedy is that the studio-created fantasy had no financial bridge to the woman after the fantasy stopped selling. Lake made sporadic comeback attempts and published a memoir, but stability never returned. She died in 1973 at 50. Her ashes were reportedly left unclaimed for a time before friends intervened. The hairstyle survived. The publicity photographs survived. The films survived. The studio sold the hair, the face, and the fantasy. Veronica Lake was left with wages and tips. Dorothy Dandridge. If Veronica Lake lost access to glamour after Paramount stopped calling, Dorothy Dandridge was never allowed the full economic protection of glamour in the first place. Dandridge's performance in Carmen Jones made history. In 1955, she became the first African-American woman nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actress. Her photograph appeared on magazine covers. Hollywood celebrated the breakthrough as evidence of progress. Then it offered her almost nowhere to go. White actresses who reached comparable visibility could move among romances, dramas, comedies, and prestige pictures. Dandridge faced a much narrower market. Leading roles for black women were scarce, and many available parts relied on stereotypes she did not want to reinforce. Turning them down protected her dignity, but it also reduced an already limited income stream. She returned repeatedly to nightclubs where her name could still sell tables. At home, she carried the heavy cost of specialized care for her daughter Harolyn, who had profound developmental disabilities. That obligation was not extravagance, it was caregiving. Her second marriage also became entangled with financial management. Failed investments in a restaurant and oil ventures accelerated the collapse. By 1963, Dandridge filed for bankruptcy with debts exceeding $100,000. She lost her Hollywood Hills home and could no longer afford private care for her daughter. That scene is almost unbearable. The first black woman nominated for Best Actress, watching possessions leave the house, while the industry that praised her milestone offered no steady path forward. Dandridge died in 1965 at 42. Her reported bank balance was $2.14. The figure is widely repeated and should be treated cautiously. But the larger truth is documented. Racism restricted the roles. Caregiving raised the costs. Bad investments and poor management deepened the damage. She broke through the door, Hollywood advertised, then discovered the room behind it had no steady paycheck. Hedy Lamarr. Dorothy Dandridge was denied a broad market for her talent. Hedy Lamarr had two kinds of value, screen value and intellectual value, and neither produced the long-term ownership her story deserved. MGM promoted Lamarr as one of the most beautiful women. In Samson and Delilah, the studio turned that beauty into one of 1,949's biggest box office attractions. Yet, like most contract stars, she did not own the negative or receive producer-level participation in the film's later earning. Away from the camera, Lamarr worked with composer George Antheil on a method for making radio-control signals jump among frequencies. Their patent was granted in 1942. The concept was intended to make signals harder to jam, especially in guiding torpedoes. It is inaccurate to say Lamarr single-handedly invented Wi-Fi. Her frequency-hopping work with Antheil belongs to the technological lineage of spread spectrum and secure wireless communication. The patent expired before the idea's broader military and commercial significance was realized. She received no stream of royalties from later wireless systems. Hollywood also failed to convert her stardom into permanent security. Attempts at independent production lost money. 6 divorces divided assets and created costs. Cosmetic procedures, legal disputes, and years of reduced employment followed. 2 shoplifting arrests became tabloid symbols of decline, though they explained far less than the headlines suggested. In later life, Lamarr lived quietly in Florida, relying on relatively modest income and a pension rather than the fortune implied by her fame. Recognition for her invention finally came, but mostly as honor, not compensation. Her films continued to circulate. Her face remained a shorthand for Golden Age beauty. She helped imagine the future, but the future did not send her royalty checks. Fame had paid her for appearances. Ownership would have paid for consequences. Oliver Hardy. Hedy Lamarr's patent expired before the future arrived. Oliver Hardy's films found a profitable second life, just as his own body was failing. With Stan, Laurel Hardy created one of cinema's most beloved comedy teams. Their bowler hats, slow burns, and perfectly timed disasters became globally recognizable. Producer Hal Roach controlled the films, while the performers worked under contracts typical of their era. Those agreements paid for making the pictures. They generally did not grant the stars ownership of the negatives or meaningful residuals from uses that had not yet been imagined. Then television arrived. During the 1950s, Laurel and Hardy shorts became ideal programming for local stations. The films entered homes every afternoon and introduced the team to children whose parents had seen them in theaters. Broadcasters and rights holders could earn from that renewed demand because the contracts allowed it. The networks were not secretly stealing money. The tragedy was legal, and structural residual protections had not been built into the original deals. Hardy and Laurel tried to earn directly through European stage tours, appearing before audiences who still adored them. But Hardy's health deteriorated. His weight, heart problems, and other illnesses made work increasingly difficult. In 1956, he suffered a severe stroke that left him largely unable to speak or move. Medical care brought expenses at the moment his earning power disappeared. Hardy died in 1957. The sharper financial image is already on the screen. His films were working every day while he could not. They were producing commercial value while the man whose timing made them valuable received none of the new television stream. A character can live forever while the actor's income stops. The films kept working after Hedy could not, and that was exactly the problem. Bela Lugosi. If Oliver Hardy's old films earned through reruns, Bela Lugosi's face became an entire merchandising language. In 1931, Universal released Dracula. Lugosi's accent stare, cape, and deliberate movements became the definitive screen vampire. The role created a visual template repeated in cartoons, cereal boxes, costumes, toys, posters, masks, and Halloween advertising for generations. For making the film, Lugosi was reportedly paid $500 a week for 7 weeks. That was respectable employment during the Depression. It was not ownership. He had no merchandising rights, and no claim on the endless commercial afterlife of Dracula's image. The role also became a cage. Studios typecast him as sinister foreigners and monsters. When the first horror cycle weakened, so did his bargaining power. His accent narrowed the parts he was offered, and his association with Dracula made it difficult to be seen as anything else. Lugosi toured regionally, appeared in inexpensive pictures, and accepted work far below his earlier stature. Chronic sciatica caused severe pain. Morphine prescribed for that pain developed into dependence. In 1955, he entered treatment publicly, hoping that honesty might help both himself and others. The comeback he wanted never fully arrived. He worked with director Ed Wood in low-budget films whose later cult fame brought him little during life. He died in 1956. Frank Sinatra, who admired him, reportedly helped with funeral expenses, though accounts differ on exactly what he paid. Meanwhile, Dracula kept selling. Every rubber mask and television rebroadcast reinforced Lugosi's immortality without rebuilding his finances. The vampire became a permanent business. Lugosi remained a man paid once to create it. The face kept earning long after the man stopped being paid. Peter Lorre. Lugosi could not escape Dracula. Peter Lorre tried to buy his way out of a different monster, the caricature Hollywood built from his own face and voice. Lorre had already created a landmark performance in Fritz Lang's M before fleeing Nazi Germany. In Hollywood, he became unforgettable in The Maltese Falcon and Casablanca. His bulging eyes, soft voice, and nervous intensity made him a superb character actor. They also made him easy to imitate. Warner Brothers repeatedly cast Lorre as oily criminals, frightened informers, and exotic villains. Cartoons copied his voice. Comedians copied his manner. The persona became public property in everything but law. Seeking control, Lorre bought out his Warner contract. Creative freedom sounded like ownership, but it also meant surrendering the steady salary and institutional protection of a major studio. His attempt to direct and star in the German film The Lost One earned later respect but little commercial success. Health problems worsened the risk. Accounts describe chronic pain, including gallbladder trouble treated with doctor-prescribed narcotics. Dependence followed. Divorces and alimony drained money. Tax pressure added another creditor. As prestigious offers thinned, he accepted television appearances and low-budget horror work to keep earning. Lorre died in 1964 at 59. Reports described an estate with little or no meaningful net value after obligations. It was the Lorre image, the whisper, the eyes, the anxious villain, that continued to appear in imitation long after studios stopped paying premium rates for the man himself. He bought his way out of one trap only to spend his final years performing the caricature he had tried to escape. Freedom cost cash. Typecasting kept the copyright in everyone's imagination but his. Florence Lawrence. Peter Lorre lost security after purchasing freedom. Florence Lawrence entered movies before performers had either security or public names. In cinema's earliest years, studios often kept actors anonymous. Executives feared that named performers would demand higher salaries. Lawrence became known to audiences as the Biograph Girl, even though viewers did not officially know who she was. Producer Carl Laemmle changed that. In 1910, he launched a publicity campaign claiming Lawrence had been killed, then revealed the story as false and presented her alive under her own name. The stunt helped transform an anonymous screen performer into a marketable personality. Lawrence is therefore widely remembered as one of the first movie stars, though the title cannot belong to one person with absolute certainty. Her name now had value, but she did not own the system built around that value. Lawrence appeared in more than 300 films. A serious on-set accident and resulting health problems reduced her ability to work. Business ventures failed. The Depression damaged what remained of her finances. By the late 1930s, she depended on small studio employment, arranged partly through relief efforts for aging performers. In 1938, after years of pain and financial insecurity, Lawrence died by suicide. Her death should not be turned into a lurid ending. The Motion Picture Relief Fund paid for her funeral. She was buried at Hollywood Cemetery, now Hollywood Forever. Her grave remained unmarked until 1991, more than half a century after her death. The woman whose public name helped prove that movie stars could sell tickets did not leave behind movie star security. She helped invent the value of a star's name, then died in a system that still had no dependable way to protect the person carrying it. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle. Florence Lawrence helped create the movie star economy. Roscoe Arbuckle reached its first summit, then watched scandal erase the value of his name. By 1920, Arbuckle was one of silent comedy's biggest stars. He had helped launch Buster Keaton and become valuable enough for Paramount to sign him to a contract widely reported at $1 million a year. He was not merely successful. He was an industry. In September 1921, a party took place in Arbuckle's suite at San Francisco's Street Francis Hotel. Actress Virginia Rappe became gravely ill and died days later. Arbuckle was accused of assault and manslaughter. The accusation became a national spectacle. Newspapers published sensational claims before a jury settled the facts. Studios withdrew his films. His earning power collapsed. Arbuckle faced 3 trials. The first 2 ended with hung juries. At the third, he was acquitted. The jury went further, issuing a written apology that said a grave injustice had been done to him. Roscoe Arbuckle was acquitted, but acquittal did not refund the defense costs or restore public trust. Legal bills reportedly exceeded hundreds of thousands of dollars. He sold property to meet them. Industry leaders banned him from appearing in films, then later lifted the formal ban, but exhibitors remained wary. Arbuckle directed under the name William Goodrich. He slowly rebuilt enough confidence to make short comedies and signed a new Warner Brothers contract in 1933. That same night, he suffered a fatal heart attack at 46. The court gave him back his name. Hollywood never gave back the fortune the scandal destroyed. His story is not proof that reputation matters more than law. It is proof that reputation can destroy earning power before the law has finished speaking. Stepin Fetchit. Arbuckle lost a fortune when a public image turned toxic. Lincoln Perry built a fortune through a public image that was toxic from the beginning. Perry became famous as Stepin Fetchit, a slow-moving, mumbling, supposedly lazy character created for white audiences. He was one of the first black performers to receive prominent screen credit, and reportedly one of the first to earn $1 million in Hollywood. The achievement came inside a humiliating bargain. The persona gave Perry visibility in an industry that denied black actors complex leading roles. It also reinforced a racist stereotype used to portray black men as foolish, unreliable, and inferior. Perry sometimes argued that his timing and apparent laziness allowed the character to outmaneuver white authority. Later, critics saw the damage more starkly. Financially, the same role that lifted him became his ceiling. Hollywood had little interest in paying him to reveal a broader range. As tastes changed and civil rights criticism grew, opportunities narrowed. Yet the studios had already captured the profitable films, and the stereotype remained attached to his name. Perry spent heavily and faced family obligations, but reducing the collapse to lifestyle would miss the structure. He earned large sums in a system that offered almost no durable ownership and very few alternative roles. In 1947, he filed for bankruptcy. Reports often cite assets of only $146 at the time, though that figure should be treated as an account from bankruptcy coverage rather than a perfect measure of his entire life. He later received some reassessment and honors, but his final years included residence at the Motion Picture and Television Country House. He died in 1985. He became rich performing the role Hollywood allowed a black man to play, then watched that same role become the ceiling over his life. The salary was real. So was the trap. Sherman Hemsley. Stepin Fetchit showed how a role could create wealth and imprison the performer. Sherman Hemsley played a character who seemed to own everything. As George Jefferson Hemsley became the strutting, sharp-tongued center of the Jeffersons, the CBS sitcom ran for 11 seasons. George owned successful dry cleaning stores, lived in a luxury apartment, and became a television symbol of upward mobility. Hemsley earned a strong actor's salary, but salary is not the same as producer ownership. The Jeffersons became a syndication staple. Reruns continued to generate licensing value for the companies and rights holders controlling the show. It would be unsafe to claim Hemsley received nothing from reruns. The more accurate point is that the largest, most durable wealth belonged to those who owned the production and distribution rights, not to the actor whose performance made George Jefferson unforgettable. Hemsley's later finances were far smaller than his fictional lifestyle suggested. He filed for bankruptcy in 1999. Reports placed his federal tax debt near $1 million, although published totals vary. He eventually settled in El Paso, Texas, living quietly and working only occasionally. He died of lung cancer in 2012. A man claiming to be Hemsley's brother challenged the will, while Hemsley's longtime companion was named beneficiary. His body remained at a funeral home for nearly 4 months, as the court considered who had authority over the estate and burial. Court reports estimated the estate at a little over $50,000. George Jefferson's apartment still appeared on television. The actor's burial waited on a modest estate dispute. He played a man who moved on up, but the richest part of the staircase belonged to the people who owned the show. Barbara Payton. Sherman Hemsley's fictional wealth outlived his real estate. Barbara Payton's image lost value the moment Hollywood discovered that Scandal could sell better than her movies. In the early 1950s, Payton looked like a major new star. She appeared with James Cagney in Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye and received the publicity treatment reserved for women studios believed could become valuable glamour properties. Then her private life became the product. Payton was involved with actor Franchot Tone while also seeing actor Tom Neal. In 1951, Neal beat Tone severely in a highly publicized confrontation. The love triangle filled newspapers. Studios that had marketed Payton's beauty now treated the scandal as proof that she was commercially dangerous. Her opportunities collapsed. Addiction and unstable relationships deepened the decline. Arrests replaced premieres in the press. In 1962, she was arrested on Sunset Boulevard in a case described as involving prostitution. That fact should not be used to shame her. It shows how far a once-marketed star had fallen after the industry withdrew work and the public turned deterioration into entertainment. Payton tried to reclaim her story in the memoir I Am Not Ashamed. By her final years, she was destitute, physically ill, and living with family in San Diego. She died in 1967 at 39 from heart and liver failure. No single villain explains every step. Addiction mattered. Personal choices mattered. So did an industry that profited from constructing a desirable woman, abandoned her when scandal damaged that construction, then continued profiting from stories about her collapse. Hollywood sold her beauty while it was profitable, then treated her ruin as a spectacle once it was not. Robert Blake. Barbara Payton's career was destroyed by old Hollywood scandal. Robert Blake's fortune was erased by a modern combination of criminal defense, civil liability, and permanent loss of employability. Blake had worked since childhood. He appeared in the Our Gang comedies, played Little Beaver in the Red Ryder films, and matured into a respected dramatic actor. In the 1970s, Beretta made him a television star. He won an Emmy and commanded the kind of salary earlier performers rarely received. Modern television also offered residual structures that old studio contracts often lacked. Blake entered late life with advantages Lugosi or Hardy never had. Then, in 2001, his wife Bonnie Lee Bakley was shot and killed outside a Studio City restaurant. Blake was arrested and prosecuted for murder. In 2005, a criminal jury acquitted him. Robert Blake was found not guilty in criminal court. A civil jury reached a different conclusion under a lower burden of proof. It found Blake liable for Bakley's death and awarded her children $30 million. The judgment was later reduced, but the financial destruction had already begun. Blake sold property, including his Studio City home. In 2006, he filed for bankruptcy. His filing listed the civil judgment, federal tax debt, state tax obligations, and legal costs against assets far below those liabilities. Acquittal did not restore his career. Studios saw insurance risk controversy and public hostility. The future earning power of an Emmy-winning actor effectively vanished. Blake later described living on a pension and maintaining a modest life away from the industry. He died in 2023 at 89. Old Hollywood contracts often drained stars slowly by denying ownership. Blake's collapse happened differently. Legal defense consumed cash. Civil court imposed enormous liability. Reputation closed the door on future work. The criminal law said not guilty. The financial consequences had already won. Hollywood made these stars look untouchable, but the ledgers told different stories. Contracts, taxes, racism, illness, scandal management, and courts did not ruin them in identical ways. The common warning was simpler: fame can be rented while ownership endures. Which story feels most unfair to you?